"You look tired, like my husband before he left," young widow told the lonely CEO at the cafe window. The snow had started again just before midnight. Soft, unhurried. New York, wrapped in holiday lights and a faint fog, felt quieter than usual. A thin white layer coated the sidewalks beneath the street lamps' warm glow. Café Loft 82 sat quietly on the corner, its windows fogged with time. Jazz drifted from the speakers, matching the lazy rhythm of the late hour. It stayed open for those who could not sleep or had nowhere else to be. Elara Monroe moved between tables with quiet ease. Her black skirt and white blouse were slightly rumpled, her blonde hair pulled into a loose knot. There were faint shadows under her eyes, and her hands were rough from work and winter air. Still, she carried herself with quiet strength, someone used to doing more than she should on far less rest than she needed. At the front window, in his usual seat after 10, sat Julian Hart. His coat was draped over the back of the chair, sleeves of his shirt neatly cuffed, silver watch catching the dim light. A single espresso sat cooling on the saucer, untouched. He watched the snow through the glass, gaze unfocused. Elara noticed. She always did. She approached with the receipt, pausing briefly as she took in the curve of his shoulders, the distant look in his eyes. She set the bill on the table, hesitating. "You look tired, like my husband before he left." Julian turned, slowly. His gaze met hers, surprised but not offended. For a moment, neither spoke. "I'm sorry," Elara said quickly, color rising in her cheeks. "I shouldn't have said that." Julian lifted a hand gently, stopping her. "That's not the worst thing someone's ever said to me." A breath of laughter slipped from her lips, unintentional. He smiled. Barely, but it was there. She did not walk away. Julian did not reach for his coat. They stayed where they were, separated only by the table and something unspoken. Outside, snow thickened. Inside, the cafe hummed, warm, amber, still. The saxophone faded into piano. Elara glanced at Julian again. "He used to sit like that," she said quietly, like he was watching something only he could see. Julian looked down at his espresso. "Did he find it?" Elara shook her head. "No, he died waiting." Julian's eyes flickered, just briefly. A look of understanding, maybe even grief, passed between them. Another silence followed, less awkward now, more true. The receipt still lay untouched. Julian finally reached for it, but paused, asking softly, "What about you?" "Still waiting." Elara met his eyes. "I stopped waiting. Now I just keep moving." He nodded. Not in agreement, but acknowledgement. Julian left a generous tip, but remained seated a while longer. He said nothing else. Elara moved to another table, stealing one glance back at him. When she returned to the counter, she noticed something she had never seen before. The espresso cup was empty, and outside, the snow kept falling. The morning came too soon. At 5 a.m., the alarm buzzed softly from a cracked phone on the floor. Elara Monroe stirred, then sat up quickly as if her body knew the routine better than her mind. Her blonde hair, still tied in the messy bun from last night, had loosened and fallen across her shoulders. The room was barely lit, just one lamp on a stacked pile of books doubling as a nightstand. A small space, maybe 30 square meters, with peeling paint and a broken heater that hummed but never truly warmed. In the corner, on a thin mattress near the wall, Lily lay curled up in a cocoon of mismatched blankets. 6 years old, soft breathing, the only peaceful thing in Elara's life. Elara moved quietly, grabbing her worn uniform and jacket. She splashed her face with cold water from the sink. The hot water had stopped working last week, and pulled on her boots. One had a sole that squeaked. She no longer noticed. Outside, the streets were still dark. She walked fast, hands deep in her coat pockets, shoulders hunched against the wind. The hotel where she worked her first job was 6 blocks away. By 5:45 a.m., she was scrubbing bathroom tiles in room 403. By 11:30 a.m., she was done. Her back ached. Her wrists were sore. She peeled off her gloves, tucked her cleaning apron into her tote bag, and headed down the street. While walking, she munched half a cold sandwich, lunch, and answered a call from her landlord. "Rent's going up next month," he said flatly. "Market rates. Nothing personal." She didn't argue, just said okay and hung up. There was no time for anger, only motion. From 2 p.m. to 5:30 p.m., she did food deliveries across the city, on foot, on borrowed bike, sometimes hopping on a bus if she could stretch the time. She wore a red cap and insulated backpack too big for her frame. She ran upstairs, smiled for tips, ignored catcalls, and then, just before sunset, it happened. While delivering an order near Midtown, she turned a corner and nearly collided with a man exiting a glass building. Sleek suit, familiar face, Julian Hart. He stopped, surprised, but only for a second. His expression did not change, but his eyes flickered. Recognition. He gave a small nod. She nodded back, breathless, clutching the delivery bag. No words, just a glance. But it stayed with him. That night, like always, he returned to Loft 82. He ordered his usual espresso, sat at his usual seat. Elara, back in her café uniform, her hair brushed back but still damp from a rushed shower, moved between tables. She was tired, but not fragile, just enduring. As she wiped the table beside him, he looked up and asked, not flippantly, not flirtatiously, just curious, "Do you ever rest?" She blinked, caught off guard. Then a soft smile touched her lips, not amused, not annoyed, just honest. Rest is a luxury for people who still have choices. He stared at her for a second, unsure what to say. That sentence, quiet, matter-of-fact, hit deeper than it should have. It stripped away the casual air between them, left something raw and real. Julian looked down at his espresso, steam fading. Elara moved away, back to work. But that night, for the first time, Julian drank the entire cup. It was a quiet night at Loft 82. The crowd had thinned, and the soft jazz playing overhead drifted more clearly than usual. Elara wiped the counter, her hands steady from habit but her eyes tired. Still 2 more hours until closing. She glanced around, then walked to a small booth in the corner, taking a rare moment to sit. Reaching into her worn tote, she pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was creased at the edges, softened by touch. Unfolding it, Elara smiled, softly, wistfully. Crayon lines covered the page. A crooked house. 3 stick figures holding hands, a woman with long yellow hair, a child, and a man. A big sun beamed overhead with uneven hearts. At the bottom, a messy scrawl read, "Mommy, this is us. One day we'll be together at home again." Alara's finger hovered over the man in the picture. Just a few lines, but enough to see him. Her husband, always tired, always pushing, gone too soon. She blinked away, the sting in her eyes. A memory came back. Lily handing her the drawing a week ago, whispering, "Mommy, Daddy says angels don't stay tired forever." Elara pressed the drawing to her chest briefly, then folded it and tucked it into her uniform pocket. She rose and picked up a tray, heading to clear the front tables. Near the door, a customer left, letting in a gust of wind. The drawing slipped from Elara's pocket and floated gently through the air, landing near Julian Hart's feet. He was mid-reach for his coffee when he noticed it. Leaning down, he picked it up, expecting a receipt. Instead, he unfolded it slowly, taking in the uneven lines and bright colors. The house, the figures, the hearts, the child's handwriting. His expression softened. When Elara returned, he stood and offered the drawing. "I think this is yours," he said quietly. She froze, then reached out, cheeks flushed. I'm sorry. It must have fallen out." "It's okay," Julian replied. "It's beautiful." Elara managed a small smile, but her eyes still shimmered from earlier tears. She turned away, but Julian spoke again, gently. "Your daughter drew that?" She nodded. Lily, she's 6. She thinks if she draws home enough times, one will come true. He watched her, saying nothing for a long beat. Then he leaned forward, just slightly, as if to show he was listening. Elara let out a quiet breath. My husband worked 3 jobs. He kept saying we'd catch up, save the house. But we didn't. And then, I lost him too. Julian lowered his gaze to his espresso cup, then carefully set it down. No noise, no reaction, just respect. I'm sorry, he said finally, quiet, sincere. Elara looked down at the drawing, one tear falling to the corner. She reached to wipe it away, but Julian was quicker. Without speaking, he extended a clean napkin. He didn't touch her, just held it out. You don't have to hide it, he said. Not from me. She took it slowly, brushing her eyes. I'm not used to people noticing, she said, voice half laugh, half ache. There was a long silence, not uncomfortable, just still. Outside, snow had begun to fall again. Elara turned her gaze toward the window, voice low. He died trying to save a house we never got to call home, Julian inhaled, searching for the right words. Not advice, not pity, just one question. What would home look like? If you could choose again. She turned to him. For the first time, really seeing him, and for the first time, she felt seen in return. Not pitied, not examined, seen. Sunday afternoons at Loft 82 were quieter. The sun filtered through the tall windows in soft streaks, catching the floating dust in the golden light. The usual clatter of weekday evenings was replaced by hushed conversations, the occasional hiss of milk steaming, and the comfort of jazz humming through the speakers. Julian stepped inside, the familiar chime above the door announcing his arrival. He walked toward his usual seat by the window, but paused. It was empty. No Elara clearing mugs nearby. No quiet hum of her voice as she took orders or wiped down counters. He glanced toward the counter, where Mia, the cafe's owner, stood preparing a tray of scones. She noticed him and smiled warmly. Is Elara off today? He asked. Mia wiped her hands on a cloth and nodded. Only day she lets herself breathe. She works too hard, that girl. Julian gave a small nod, thoughtful. He ordered his espresso, took his usual seat, and stared out the window like he always did, but he didn't stay long. Before leaving, he returned to the counter and handed Mia a small brown box tied with a neat ivory ribbon. Tucked underneath the bow was a folded note, written in clean, slanted handwriting. For you and Lily. In case you forgot what Sunday feels like. That evening, in a tiny apartment lit only by a kitchen bulb and a second-hand lamp, Elara came home with a paper bag full of discounted groceries. She set it on the table and shrugged off her coat, rubbing the cold from her hands. Mommy, Lily called out from her little seat at the table. There's a box. It's for us. Elara raised an eyebrow. A box? She spotted it next to Lily's coloring books, delicate, carefully wrapped, with a note tucked beneath the ribbon. Her fingers stilled on the ribbon as she read Julian's handwriting. Then she slowly opened the box. Inside, 2 cinnamon muffins, still warm from earlier in the day, and a small packet of hot cocoa mix. Lily clapped her hands, eyes wide. It smells like Christmas. Elara laughed. A real laugh, the kind that surprised even herself. The sound filled the room like something long forgotten. She heated the cocoa, poured it into mismatched mugs, and they sat on the floor wrapped in a blanket, eating muffins and watching the flicker of headlights pass beneath the window. Elara read the note again, silently. It was just a gesture, but it felt like light finding its way into a room that had stayed dim for too long. The next night, Loft 82 buzzed back to life. Julian was already seated at his usual spot when Elara walked in for her shift. She spotted him almost immediately. Their eyes met. He gave a quiet nod. As she passed by with a tray, he asked, "Did Lily approve of the muffins?" Elara smiled, brighter than usual. "She asked if we won a prize." Julian chuckled softly. "Well, did you?" "She says we did." Their exchange felt easy, familiar. Not just customer and server, but something warmer forming beneath the surface. Later that evening, the calm was disrupted. A middle-aged man in a wrinkled suit, halfway through a second whiskey, gestured too boldly for Ilara's attention. As she approached, he reached out and brushed her arm with a smirk. "How come someone like you's stuck waitressing here?" he slurred. Ilara stepped back, her spine stiffening. She kept her voice level. "I'll take your order if you're ready." But her eyes darted quickly, calculating distance, risk, exit. Julian saw the exchange from across the room. Without hesitation, he stood and crossed the floor. He did not raise his voice or make a scene. He simply stepped beside Ilara, calm but unwavering. "I think she heard your order the first time," he said, his voice steady. "Let her work." The man glanced between them, his gaze flickering with irritation. But one look at Julian's expression made him mutter something under his breath and turn away. Ilara exhaled quietly. Julian didn't linger. "You shouldn't have to explain why you're tired," he said softly before walking back to his seat. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Ilara sat by the window with her phone in hand. She looked again at the note she had kept from the day before, then slowly typed, "Thank you." "We shared it. It felt like a little holiday." The reply came just a few minutes later. "Then let's make more of them." And Ilara, for the first time in a very long while, allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, she could. The snow had started earlier than expected that evening, drifting gently from a pale sky that had turned the city to shades of soft gray and silver. At exactly 5:12 p.m., Ilara's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Keegan, her elderly neighbor. "I'm so sorry, dear. I'm not feeling well tonight. I won't be able to watch Lily." Ilara stared at the screen, heart tightening. She had no choice. By 6:15, she was rushing through the back door of Loft 82 with Lily bundled in a second-hand puffy coat and a backpack full of crayons, coloring books, and snacks. She quietly approached Mia, the cafe's owner. "Just for tonight," Ilara said softly, nodding toward her daughter. "She'll stay in the corner. I promise she won't bother anyone." Mia, ever kind, gave a warm smile. "Of course, sweetheart. She's always welcome here." Lily settled into the small booth near the window with her coloring supplies, happily humming to herself as Ilara tied her apron and got to work. Around 7, Julian walked in, brushing snowflakes from his shoulders. He spotted Ilara immediately, and then his eyes landed on the small figure near the window. A child. Her child. He walked to his usual seat, then paused as Ilara came to take his order. "I had no choice," she said quickly, cheeks flushed. Julian glanced toward Lily, then back at Ilara. "No problem. I like smart little people." A few minutes later, Lily noticed Julian doodling idly on a napkin. Curiosity got the better of her. She slid from her booth and tiptoed to his table. "What are you drawing?" she asked, eyes wide. Julian looked down, a bit amused. "Not sure. Maybe a snowman? Or a tree?" Lily studied the napkin seriously. "That looks like a blob." He laughed. "You're not wrong." She climbed onto the seat across from him. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Julian paused. The question caught him off guard, not just because of how innocent it was, but how much it seemed to matter. He looked at Ilara, who was busy at the counter, then turned back to Lily. "Yes," he said finally, with a soft smile. "I'd like to think so." The two spent the next 10 minutes drawing on napkins together, Lily's confident strokes next to Julian's awkward lines. She sketched a tiny Christmas tree with a lopsided star. He attempted a cat that looked more like a potato. From across the cafe, Ilara kept stealing glances. She smiled quietly at the sight, her daughter giggling, Julian listening patiently, even pretending to be impressed when Lily drew a picture of a family under a big red roof. Then came the moment that froze Julian's breath. Lily leaned in, lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. "I think Mommy needs a friend. She cries when she thinks I'm sleeping." Julian blinked. He looked over at Ilara again, just as she turned away, wiping something from her cheek. She had not heard. but he had, and something in him changed. Later that evening, when the crowd had thinned, Elara glanced toward Lily's booth, empty. Panic exploded in her chest. She dropped the tray in her hands. "Lily?" she called out, voice rising in terror. Mia looked up. Julian stood instantly. I don't know where she went," Elara gasped, pushing through the cafe, checking under tables, in the bathroom, outside the door. The wind had picked up, snow thickening. Elara was shaking. Her knees buckled. Julian caught her before she fell. "Breathe," he said, gripping her shoulders. "Stay here. I'll find her. I promise I will." Then he ran. No coat, no umbrella. Just into the snow, into the dark. He called her name down alleyways, across streets, through parks and bus stops. After 10 agonizing minutes, just as the cold began to sting his lungs, he spotted a tiny figure curled against a brick wall near a bus shelter. "Lily!" he shouted, kneeling beside her. She was soaked, arms around her knees, clutching a crumpled drawing against her chest. "Are you okay?" he whispered, quickly wrapping his coat around her small frame. Lily burst into tears, burying her face in his neck. "I went to find Daddy," she sobbed, "so Mommy won't be lonely or have to work so much. But I got lost." Julian held her tightly, swallowing the lump in his throat. A man who thought himself hardened by loss, wealth, and life, now trembling. He cried too, but only Lily saw it. When Julian returned to the cafe, carrying Lily in his arms, the bell above the door jingled softly. The room fell silent. Elara turned, and the moment her eyes found her daughter, everything inside her collapsed. She rushed forward, tears pouring freely, wrapping her arms around Lily and Julian, pulling them both into the circle of her trembling embrace. The three stood together in the middle of the cafe, wrapped in one another like threads long torn, now mending. The room stirred. A few gasps, a quiet cheer. Someone clapped, someone else wiped their eyes. Lily peeked up from Julian's arms, looked at her mother, then at him and said, "Maybe I found a new daddy for Mommy." Elara broke. She buried her face in Julian's shoulder, crying without shame. He held her and Lily close, arms steady, eyes wet but clear. In that moment, they were no longer 3 separate stories. They were a beginning. The invitation came quietly, casually, as they stood outside Loft 82 after closing. Julian had walked Elara and Lily to the corner as usual, snow crunching beneath their feet, Lily swinging her mother's hand. Just before they parted ways, Julian turned to Elara. "I was thinking, if you and Lily are free this weekend, maybe dinner? My place. Nothing fancy. Just food and quiet." Elara blinked, surprised. "You cook?" "I try," he smirked. "But you're allowed to pretend it tastes good." That Saturday evening, they arrived at Julian's apartment, a spacious yet warm space with bookshelves, cozy lighting, and the faint scent of roasted garlic wafting from the kitchen. Lily immediately gravitated toward the large window overlooking the city skyline, pressing her nose to the glass. Julian emerged from the kitchen with a smile and a wooden spoon in hand. "Dinner is almost edible," Elara laughed, a soft sound that lit up her whole face. She was wearing a sweater slightly too big, sleeves tugged over her hands, comfortable, unguarded. They sat down at the dining table. On their plates were roasted vegetables, lightly buttered pasta, and a small bowl of salad. A pitcher of cold lemonade sat in front of Lily, with sliced strawberries floating inside. "No meat tonight," Julian said, watching Lily poke a carrot with her fork. "But I've got chocolate pudding for dessert, and that usually wins people over." "It already smells like winning," Elara said, smiling genuinely. Lily took a bite, and her eyes lit up. "Mommy, this is better than my school lunch." Julian placed a hand dramatically on his chest. High praise. The room filled with small talk, soft laughter, and the comforting clinks of silverware. Lily told stories from school, asked if Julian had a cat, he did not, and announced halfway through dessert that this is the best Saturday. After dinner, Lily curled up on the couch with a blanket and one of Julian's throw pillows, yawning between picture books. Ilara sat beside her, gently stroking her daughter's hair as her eyes began to flutter closed. Julian returned from the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. "I can drive you both home whenever you're ready." "She might knock out right here," Ilara whispered, looking down at Lily's sleeping face. They stood in quiet for a moment, watching the little girl sleep soundly, cheeks rosy from warmth and laughter. Then Ilara turned slightly, voice softer than before. "You've given us more peace in one evening than I've had in years." Julian's eyes met hers. There was no grand declaration in his gaze, no need for explanation, just presence, steady, open, real. He reached out and gently took her hand, not tightly, not urgently, just enough. Her fingers curled into his instinctively. They sat beside each other in silence, letting the moment breathe. There were no promises made, no walls broken by force, just a woman and a man, both scarred by different forms of loneliness, quietly choosing to sit in the same room with it, and with each other. Ilara looked at their joined hands, then at Lily, already dreaming. For the first time in a long while, she let herself hope, not for something grand or life-changing, just more evenings like this. Enough warmth to get through the winter, enough kindness to believe again, and the comfort of knowing someone had chosen to stay, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The email came late in the afternoon, as Ilara stood at the bus stop with a bag of groceries digging into her wrist. Her phone buzzed with the landlord's name. She opened it while balancing Lily's juice box in one hand. Subject: updated rent notice. Message: due to rising maintenance costs and local market adjustment, rent will increase by 20% starting next month. Ilara read the words 3 times before her vision blurred. 20%. That was groceries. That was shoes for Lily. That was a month's worth of late-night shifts. Back at home, she cooked dinner in silence. Lily sat at the table, humming softly while coloring. Ilara tried to smile when Lily spoke, but her mouth felt too heavy. That night, when Lily had fallen asleep, Ilara sat on the floor by the heater and opened her worn planner. She did the math again, and again. No combination of her 3 jobs could stretch far enough. She pressed her palm to her forehead, then to her eyes. Quiet sobs broke through, frustrated, exhausted tears that no one else could see, except Lily wasn't fully asleep. She cracked one eye open and saw her mother rocking slowly, holding her breath to not wake her. Lily's little heart ached. Mommy had been doing better lately. She smiled more. They had muffins and cocoa. She even sang in the kitchen once. And now she was crying again. Lily reached for her backpack and found her pink notepad. She picked her brightest crayon, the blue one, because blue felt like hope. The next afternoon at Loft 82, Julian walked in just after 6. The cafe buzzed gently with evening regulars. He took his usual seat, opened his laptop, but before he could start anything, he looked up. Lily was there. She stood beside his table in her tiny red coat, looking determined and serious, like someone about to say something very important. Julian straightened. "Hey there, Lily." Without a word, she handed him a folded piece of paper. Then she gave a quick nod and turned back to where Ilara stood at the counter, distracted with drink orders. Julian looked down. The handwriting was large and a little shaky. The crayon pressed hard into the paper. "Please don't let Mommy get tired again." He stared at it for a long moment. The sound of the cafe faded around him. His fingers gripped the edges gently, then carefully folded the note back along the creases Lily had made. He stood up, slipped the paper into his coat pocket, and walked outside without a word. Not even goodbye. Ilara noticed him leave. Her heart sank. Had something happened? Had she done something wrong? She didn't see the way Julian stood across the street, pulling out his phone. Nor did she hear the steady tone in his voice as he made a single call. "Hey, I need to accelerate the move-in date on that unit we talked about." "Yes, and make sure it's rent-controlled under the community grant clause." He paused. "And call the non-profit board." I want them to take one more interview this week for the assistant position. Her name's Elara Monroe." He looked up at the cafe windows, at the woman wiping a table while her daughter giggled in the corner. Something in his chest tightened, not from burden, but purpose. Then, quietly, he added, "And make sure the welcome basket includes cocoa and cinnamon muffins." The morning air carried the soft chill of early spring, the kind that made you reach for a sweater but smile at the sun. Elara stood at the window of her new apartment, a small but charming place on the third floor, just across from a quiet park where the trees had begun to bloom again. Light poured in through gauzy curtains, touching the worn wooden floor with gold. The space was nothing fancy: second-hand furniture, chipped mugs, and a small table that wobbled slightly. But for the first time in years, Elara felt something she had almost forgotten: stability. The rent, miraculously, was affordable. Suspiciously so. The lease came through a private community fund with no named sponsor. She had her guesses, especially since Julian had said nothing at all when she mentioned the deal, just offered a soft smile and changed the subject. She let him keep his secret. Some gifts, she had learned, were best left unwrapped. Elara now worked as an office assistant at a non-profit focused on helping single mothers and housing insecure families. Julian had quietly connected her to the director. She passed the interview on her own merit. The job offered regular hours, health benefits, and dignity. It did not feel like a handout. It felt like a new chapter. At Café Loft 82, things were different too. Julian no longer sat alone by the window with half-finished espresso. Now, he sat with Elara, sometimes with Lily in tow, their drinks side by side and shoulders brushing slightly when they laughed. Sometimes they talked about books, sometimes about taxes, sometimes they said nothing at all and just watched the world go by, comfortably, like people who no longer feared the silence. One Friday evening, after closing time, Lily ran up to Julian, her hands behind her back and a sly smile on her face. "This is for you," she declared, thrusting forward a small bundle wrapped in a napkin. Julian carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a handmade bracelet, blue yarn, knotted in uneven loops, but unmistakably made with love. "For you," Lily repeated, her voice proud. "Because now, you're part of us." Julian looked at Elara, who stood watching nearby, her hand pressed over her heart, then back at Lily. He slipped the bracelet on at once, the yarn loose around his wrist. His throat tightened. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I've never been prouder to belong anywhere." A week later, it was Lily's 7th birthday. Julian arrived with a cake decorated in purple frosting and tiny edible stars. Elara made homemade lemonade, and they all sang, loudly and off-key, in their cozy living room. Later, as Lily chased her balloon across the room, Julian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He walked over to Elara, who had been folding the torn wrapping paper into neat piles. "I don't want to fix you," he said softly, opening the box. Inside was a thin silver ring, simple and elegant, with a single pale blue gem, the exact color of Lily's eyes. "I just want to build with you, a home, a future, a life, with all its hard days and good ones. Together." Elara froze. For a second, she didn't breathe. Then her eyes filled. "Yes," she whispered, the word trembling with relief, joy, and certainty. Lily gasped from across the room. "Wait, does this mean we're a real family now?" Julian grinned. Elara nodded through tears. Lily ran to them, arms wide, and the three of them fell into a hug so full it barely fit inside the little apartment. From the street below, they were just shadows behind a window, 3 figures tangled in a moment that needed no explanation. Inside, Elara rested her head on Julian's shoulder and whispered, almost too softly to hear, "You didn't just give me a roof. You gave me something I never dared to hope for again." Julian kissed the top of her head. "A reason to stay," he said. "A place to belong." And with that, their story, once made of broken pieces, finally became a home. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or brought a tear to your eye, don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt tales just like this. Every story we share is crafted to remind you of the quiet strength of love, hope, and human connection. Hit that hype button to support our channel and help us keep telling stories that matter. Turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of warmth and inspiration. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes a stranger by the window is just the beginning of a beautiful new home.